It's an interesting insight that you bring, that reasoning, his visit, who said that this visit is not really the result of his prior visit months or a couple of months ago, maybe not a couple of months ago, to Russia and China. Yeah, it could be very true. He must have been given maybe some kind of assurances, as you said. But now I have a question from what you said. You said that, now BRICS is looking at Africa, and one of the team for this summit is actually BRICS and Africa. That's one of the 4 teams which are on the table for this summit. Now, his leadership, if it is his leadership that's needed, his consistency with his principle, then of course his leadership to impact the African countries, right? Then, okay, good. We agree until here. Then the President Isaias, or even the country Eritrea, is, because they have been so quiet. I was asking this question to my analysts here whenever Eritrea comes up in the discussion. You have been so shy for long, like media shy, kind of, for a long time, for more than 3 decades. And now what brings out the president now, meaning that was as the time when his visit in Russia and China. So my question is, he's barely known amongst the African nation. Even here, myself, when we discuss Eritrea, when Eritrea comes, into the discussion, people ask, like, we haven't heard about Eritrea. So why do they think he will have? I'm not underestimating him, definitely not. But why do a man that has not been heard that much and known, you don't hear him talking, like, for example, the Kagame of Rwanda, or I don't know, there are many leaders who talk, like Ruto, Museveni of Uganda, that they believe he would make an impact.
Mahlet,
yeah,
that actually is his biggest selling point.
Really?
One thing about Pierre is that he walks the talk.
True.
One of the reasons why there is a high level of trust of powers like Russia. I mean, it is not an easy thing, Mahlet, for Putin to trust you, and they trust Pierre. It's not an easy thing for the president of China to trust you, and they trust Pierre. Why is that the case? Because there's a difference between talking and playing into the gallery of world politics, and actually meaning what you undertake to do. And you talk about Kagame, you talk about President Museveni, you talk about other presidents who talk a lot. Sometimes they speak as, they really talk Pan-African. But you see, one of the challenges of Africa, Mahlet, is leaders who talk to the gallery but do less of the work. You see Ruto talking a lot, but his actions are contrary. You see Kagame talking about Pan-Africanism, and then the next day, is among those who want to send a force to Haiti, fellow Africans, to go and invade the country. That isn't Pan-Africanism. You hear Ruto speaking about Pan-Africanism, and he's sending Kenyan soldiers to Haiti to go and invade a fellow country on behalf, of the West. So this contradiction between what you say and what you do is why these leaders, are held in suspicion by countries who have even better intelligence, because China has better intelligence. They're able to tell that this one is just talking, but the fact is in bed with the West. That is that you don't play with Russia. They have one of the best intelligence, the best intelligence infrastructure in the world. China, this is a superpower. They know which leader just talks, and they know which leader keeps quiet and does it. Now, you are saying Pierre has been quiet over this. Even in Africa, anybody who has followed events, anybody who chooses to judge leaders by what they do, will tell you that he has very high respect for the president of Eritrea. It's not just about talking. It's okay to talk and get hand claps and get ululations, and they praise you and they write about you. But what Africa needs, Mahlet, is people who walk the talk. When just after getting independence, Pierre said Eritrea would become a self-independent country. 2 years later, he asked all those who wanted to bring aid to keep their aid. This is the kind of leadership we want. You do less talking, you do more work, and this is what Pierre does, and this is what Africa needs. This is what we are seeing right now in Burkina Faso. Do more of the work, get to the work, and this is what Pierre does. So it's not about saying that he has been quiet. Yes, he has been quiet, but he has been working. And anybody who follows Eritrea does not cannot fail to notice that Eritrea has some of the best indicators, even with sustainable goals. You look at the health sector; it's among the best, in Africa. Even the economy isn't doing so bad. And when you look at the fact that it has been under sanctions for years, then you begin to appreciate that what has been done under those circumstances is massive, and that it's only a leader who does the work more than the talk who can achieve such a feat in any African country. So China knows this, Russia knows this, and let me tell you, Mahlet, China's problem with the so-called Pan-African presence in Africa is actually that the contradiction between what they say and what they do. Look at them. They talk about Pan-Africanism. They talk about a multipolar world. When they are voting in the National Security Council, they are voting with the West, taking sides with the West. How is that Pan-Africanism? Haiti is being invaded, and you are sending in soldiers. But while you're doing that, you are wearing counter suits to prove that you're Pan-African. That is a contradiction. It's a hypocrisy. And international courtesy, which China and Russia understand better, states that they may not have to say it in the open. Yes. So that is that, Mahlet.
I'm glad that I asked. I said it clear. I'm not underestimating his leadership and what he's capable of, and then the diplomacy of Eritrea. They do a lot of things, but we just don't read it. It's not on media. So BRICS, as the name stands for, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, prior to this summit, around 40 countries, 40, have applied to be a member of BRICS, and among us from these countries, from Africa, like Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. These are the likes of big countries that have applied to be a member, and Eritrea is not amongst these countries, and neither we have heard an interest prior to this summit from their official that Eritrea being a member to be a member of BRICS. So what do you think, that President Isaias or Eritrea can bring to BRICS? And then also, what does Eritrea has more than other countries? Like, for example, what makes Eritrea favorable in terms of, it did not apply to be a member, but in terms of hearing from the president or anything? What can we expect?
Okay, Mahlet, thank you for that question. You've elaborated quite well that a number of countries have applied to join the BRICS, and Eritrea isn't one of those that has applied. Neither is there even a rumor that they're interested in joining. But of course, an invitation was extended to all heads of state in Africa to go and attend the summit in South Africa. And a number of them have jetted in. As we speak, they are engaged in the summit in South Africa. I think that looking at Eritrea and having followed the politics of Eritrea straight from the time of liberation 30 years ago, one begins to wonder. Yesterday when I saw President Isaias jetting into South Africa, and I saw part of the excitement with which he was received, I saw a man who holds a particular position that that other BRICS members highly esteem. And I remember today I wrote an article to that extent. You see, Mahlet, a number of countries have, of course, applied to join the BRICS. Now, we don't know which ones of them will be admitted. And I know that there are a number of discussions that we are having here and in other platforms on what criteria will perhaps be used to admit them and which ones stand a better chance to be admitted to this emerging alliance of global nations. I've called them, not me calling them, it's a fact that these nations represent, their continents and the aspirations of their countries. So what puts Eritrea in a better place in the event that it would want to join? Actually, that is how you frame the question, Mahlet. I would like to reframe the question and say, because I have argued that Eritrea might not even need to apply to join. I am of the opinion that they could actually invite Eritrea to join instead of applying to sending in a request to join. Incidentally, that's what they did with South Africa. South Africa was invited to join. Of course, for South Africa's case, I can understand because they wanted an entry into Africa. That is one. And South Africa, of course, is one of the 2-3 largest economies in Africa. But here is Eritrea. It is not among the largest economies. It is not even the most populous, country in Africa. It even doesn't have the population which gives a numerical advantage in terms of the marketability, talk of business, perhaps, the business arm of BRICS. So what would interest the BRICS in having Eritrea as a member as one of their members? This is an interesting question, Mahlet, and I'm going to tackle it from two perspectives. Other countries, their chances to join the BRICS can be judged on the basis of their GDP, their economy. It can be judged on the basis of their population. For example, others have looked at Nigeria, looked at Ethiopia, looked at Egypt. And when they look at those countries, people are looking at the GDP. It's among the biggest in Africa. And we are talking about the BRICS being interested in countries which bring in a larger GDP. In fact, most people, when judging the potential of BRICS to rival other alliances in the world, look at the GDP. And of course, if you look at the GDP, the BRICS is way above all other alliances combined. But then, of course, Eritrea doesn't have that big GDP. But we are saying it may not actually even request to join. It is going to be invited to join. That's my perspective. Why do I say that? It brings in the second aspect, Mahlet, the aspect of the leader of the country. Do not forget, the BRICS is at a formative stage. The BRICS is at a level where it is still being backed, and therefore it desires a kind of arrangement where the right leadership is in it. So I think the biggest and the first quality that's going to have Eritrea admitted into BRICS is going to be the quality of its leader, the track record of the president of Eritrea. And I think they're going to be looking at that. I began by saying that if you look at the politics of Eritrea straight from independence, Eritrea presents the kind of politics, the kind of economic policies around which the BRICS as an alliance is actually founded. You look at the policies of multipolarity. You look at it is quest for self-reliance over the years. And what makes Eritrea a very interesting example, and why I think that the BRICS leadership is going to be very interested in bringing in the president of Eritrea to be part of this alliance, is because President Isaias didn't just wake up yesterday. If you go back 30 years ago, the man's ideas of self-reliance, the man's ideas of multipolarity began straight from the day that Eritrea gained its independence as a country. You will remember about 2-3 years later, Eritrea began to refuse food aid, for example, from entering its country. So why am I saying this? I'm trying to say this to show us that Eritrea's position as a country that prioritizes self-reliance goes back to 30 years ago. Earlier this year, Mahlet, the president of Eritrea, had a working visit in China. and also had a working visit in Russia. Most people might think that it is out of the blue. I don't share that opinion. It goes back for me as evidence of President Isaiah's insight. I would call it that it was by prophetic design. That President Isaiah was able to see the events that are taking place at this moment 30 years ago. President Isaiah was able to predict that at some certain point in time, the world would begin to revolt against hegemonistic powers, and we would begin to see different centers of power emerging. And he knew that if I can only hold on up to that time, then a time will come, despite the sanctions, despite the rapprochement, despite what I'm going to suffer as an individual president and as a country, in the next 20, 30 years, we are going to see a multipolar world. And in that multipolar world, Eritrea, with its long-standing insistence on its sovereignty, will be a key player. And that's why we are seeing recently, of course, he visited China, he visited Russia. You begin to see that President Isaiah is playing a central role in a multipolar world. And for me, this is important for BRICS. Why? BRICS is at a formative stage. And being at a formative stage, BRICS needs leaders with foresight. Leaders who are able to see into the future. Leaders who are able to predict what will happen in the next 10, 20 years. So, at a personal level, President Isaiah has a kind of prophetic insight that could be very significant and important for BRICS. You know, the emergence of BRICS, of course, offers a challenge to other alliances. So if I was a member of BRICS and I know that this should be what is playing in the mind of President Putin of Russia, this should be the thing that's playing in the mind of President Xi of China. They desire a kind of membership, not just those that have the biggest GDP, because at the end of the day, this alliance being at a formative level will need leadership. It needs the kind of leaders who understand what it takes to build an alliance. And the president of Eritrea, considering his history, considering his track record, considering his commitment to multipolarity, considering his perseverance and resistance to the hegemonistic powers that have sought to subdue not just Eritrea, but any country that seeks to diverge from their ambitions. Considering that track record, I think that it presents a very interesting kind of leadership that would be very significant for BRICS. And I think those at BRICS will be looking at that this man can provide an example, that can provide experience and the leadership, and of course the foresight that they will need going forward.
Thank you very much, Lambert, for that. So, do you think that only the leadership of President Isaiah is enough for him to be invited? That's one. So only the leadership, because what we are seeing, what you said from the beginning, what we hear, what we read is that most of the time, whether it's Ethiopia, Egypt, or Iran, or Saudi Arabia, it's the GDP and the natural resource that they're going to bring to the table. That's one. So is the leadership enough, good enough to join?
Well, I think leadership is the first.
Okay.
Yes, leadership is a first, and for me, I think that is what President Xi of China and Putin of Russia would want first. They want leaders who have a clear understanding first of what BRICS is, who have a clear understanding and a clear projection of what BRICS could become in the next 10 years. And President Isaiah has shown over time that he's somebody who's able to see to the future. But that's not the only reason. Also, the potential of Eritrea, in terms of its geostrategic location at the horn of Africa. President Isaiah has also shown a level of dependence. Is the one leader that President Xi and Russia and China and other leaders in the BRICS alliance can actually depend on. And so much about Eritrea is not known, but the potential for Eritrea to contribute even economically is significant. We may not have to look at it in terms of its GDP, but we have to look at it in terms of the potential to grow its GDP, given the right circumstances. One of the reasons the GDP and the economy of Eritrea is not performing at its best has been the blockade, that has been made on the country straight from around, I think, 1999. When sanctions were put on the country, and the demonization of the country among Western partners. But the potential to grow, because you see, Mahlet, for any country to grow, it begins from its laws, the policies of that country. And I think looking at Eritrea as a country, the policy framework is the right one. The insistence on self-reliance is the correct one. The insistence on mutually beneficial relationships is the right policy. The discipline of Eritreans as people is another one. If you look at among the most hardworking people within the continent, it's Eritreans. You cannot have managed to have Eritrea today if it wasn't for the national discipline of the people of Eritrea. So the human resource in Eritrea is very, very significant. What this human resource needs is a little bit of an alliance with the countries that are willing to operate on a basis of respect. Countries that are willing to offer opportunities and to receive opportunities. Countries that are able to help give this human resource the technology, the exposure, and the kind of infrastructure that is required for them to be able to demonstrate their expertise, for them to be able to leverage their resources and grow as a country. I believe, it is just of recent that we are seeing the government of Eritrea reaching out so much to the world, and not just to any world, reaching out to China, reaching out to Russia, reaching out to other development partners who don't exactly have a very close affinity with the West. It is coming at a time, I think, because President Isaias realizes that in his prophetic insight, this is the moment when the world has gotten different power centers and is trying to take hold of these opportunities. In the past, for example, if this summit was happening maybe 10 years ago, I don't think any of us would have expected President Isaias to attend this summit. I mean, He's always kept himself away. Why all of a sudden are we seeing him giving interviews to the media? Why all of a sudden are we seeing him going to Russia and signing contracts? Why all of a sudden are we seeing him going to China and signing, business contracts? Why all of a sudden are we seeing him going to South Africa, accepting the invitation to go and be part of this alliance? Because he has noticed an opportunity. He has realized that there is now, a broadening of power centers outside those who have disenfranchised and tried to bedevil and sanction and subjugate Eritrea. So, if he can be able to leverage these opportunities, then we see Eritrea's GDP, blossoming, at an unprecedented rate, because the human resource is there. The national psyche, in terms of the kind of development that should be pursued, is well entrenched in Eritrea. And I think this is what still the think tanks within the BRICS Alliance would be looking at. Because some countries have had all the critical factors you need, all the friendships, all the IMF loans, all the World Bank loans, all the kind of pacts from the West, and they still have a GDP that's not really so much better than Eritrea. What about Eritrea that has been under sanctions? Now, Russia, China, Brazil, these countries know that Eritrea as a country has all the critical factors, the human resource, it has the natural resources that are still unbroken. If they can ally and be able to give opportunities to this country, it is going to boost it up in terms of the GDP. And so from an economic perspective, they will still benefit from a big GDP. They will still benefit from the human resource, benefit from the resources of Eritrea. And above else, I mentioned this, although I didn't speak much about it, the geopolitical location of Eritrea at the Horn of Africa next to the Red Sea. This again is a matter that is very significant. You know, it is strategic that they would not just want any country anywhere. The positioning of Eritrea at the Horn of Africa, particularly where it's located, is very significant in maritime politics. You know, the access to the sea, the use of it, you know, and I'm sure China, Russia will be quite interested in this positioning. They have already said that, and they acknowledge the significance of that. So it is just more than, it is not just leadership. Although for me, I see leadership as for me, the biggest, you know, take away that they would want from Africa. I mentioned something recently that BRICS is foresighted. BRICS is looking at a multipolar world, and they have a particular interest in Africa. Where does the leadership of President Isaias again become significant? It is in offering this experience. It is in cushioning, in cushioning the emerging crop of leaders within the continent who have a multipolar thinking. You will, I'll take you to what's happening right now in West Africa. We have seen the kind of renaissance that's taking place in Mali, what's taking place in Burkina Faso, what's taking place in Niger, and that is going to be spreading. Let me tell you, the kind of understanding, the awareness that they need to take charge of their future, charge of their resources, that they want to be allowed to relate with the world without being forced to choose sides. Now, but you know, these leaders are beginning on a path, Mahlet, that Eritrea began 30 years ago. You know, so the experience of having lived through the 30 years is something that the BRICS will be interested in, particularly because they need these countries to continue. One of the biggest beneficiaries of what is taking place, the awakening, the desire for self-assertion, self-determination, what we see in West Africa and other parts of Africa is good. Is good for BRICS, but it's not going to be easy. Why won't it be easy? Because while they have chosen this path, you are seeing sanctions coming. You are seeing Burkina Faso being sanctioned right now. You are seeing Niger being sanctioned. Will these leaders be able to maintain the momentum and ensure that that they do not cave in, they do not accept and fall into the pressure? Because they said so much pressure. If they should accept and fall into this pressure, then they go back to the very beginning. You know, a position where BRICS would have wanted them to be removed from, and where, as it stands, they have been removed. Now, how do they sustain this path? This is where the leadership, the guidance, and the example in practice of Eritrea comes into play. So again, I am saying, if BRICS has Eritrea as a member, if BRICS has President Isaias as a member, then they're going to begin to see that he can position himself and offer this kind of leadership, offer his experience, having gone through the same treatment over the last 30 years, offer this experience to the new leaders of Burkina Faso, of Mali, of Niger, and other countries within Africa that are finally breaking off the vestiges of colonialism and beginning to pursue a self-determinant path. So that is where his leadership again comes in. I think, and I believe, Mahlet, that of all the countries that have applied to join the BRICS, if you look at their presidents, and a decision has to be made based on the kind of leadership they offer. The president of Eritrea, that is President Isaias, takes the first spot before anybody who would be forced, who would perhaps have to make a decision based on leadership alone.
Interesting. Very, nicely laid out.